podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother, Justice Rajee.
Today, at this time, and at this moment, I think staying in theme, talking a little politics and elected and black folks and black people that are elected. We haven't had a conversation about Eric Adams. And then we're going to talk about somebody else, I think, to juxtapose a little later. However, I wanted to start with the Mayor Adams because, his entire, what do you say? What do you call it? Time? It's not, regime seems like the wrong word. That wasn't the word that like term. His term.
Yeah, term
right?
is probably the best.
Definitely seen as a bit of a kind of backlash, at least to me, at least mine now. He let me know if I'm off point, but I think in the context that he got elected, he was seen as a bit of a swing back from the energy of 2020 and where, sort of more, maybe more progressive, what I'm saying, black electeds, definitely more, I mean, as a former law enforcement officer, definitely more thought of as law and order EE or adjacent, at least. From my engagement with other folks, in the macro sense of the political spectrum, not a lot of folks that I know's favorite mayor or candidate of the options that were available. And who proceeded to, as I will jokingly call the sitting mayor, who would definitely holler at your moms. You know what I'm saying? Like he like he kind of, that's the way he moved. You know what I'm saying? Real somewhat slick with it. Yeah, I mean, like kind of like, he had a real, like, I got a mandate, like W type of energy.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
if he really had a mandate, but that's how he was kicking it. And basically he's got federal charges for racketeering, and it seemed like they're coming for the whole crew. You know what I'm saying? Whoever was down with him in office, I think it's like
Bad Boy as a crew, record label, staff, everybody. In the word of the urban bard Tupac Shakur.
You know what I'm saying? Like, if I was somebody who worked in the upper levels of the administration, I would hope I kept my emails. Like, I hope you've been keeping track of your emails, brother, because somebody go want to know what you've been up to, especially if you were more of a, like a political, which I guess at that level, a lot of those are political.
You all are right.
Yeah.
At that level, once you're at a chief level or this and the third, you're essentially political. Like, you can obviously do policy, but you're essentially political at that moment.
Yeah, you're in there because you're part of the team. You know what I'm saying? You ain't in there because it was like, oh no, he's been the best chief of staff anyone's ever had in this city, or whatever, whatever role. Those are roles that are usually filled by people that's in your squad. You know what I'm saying? Whatever.
Absolutely.
It may be. So to have federal charges, to have this basically moment where, and I don't want to, I mean, the potential nature of the charges, I don't necessarily want us to like go all in on that, because I don't know if that's germane, but what I'm thinking about with this is, and I want to get your thought, is when you have a figure like this, in a city that obviously matters, more than most, although in terms of like springboards, it's definitely not, I don't know if there was ever a time. I think there was a time like in the 30s or wherever you like the mayor of New York, you might be able to then like springboard right to the presidency or something.
President, yeah,
But
yeah.
America's a lot more people since then. It don't work like that no more. Um, the like sort of just kind of look at because I think like the history of what happens when black folks get in leadership and executive positions, especially at mayors, um, and how things go or how they don't go, I think is always a fascinating thing in a large aggregate sense. But then the very specific nature of this individual, you know what I'm saying, to get jammed up this way, given the way he had presented himself, is just particularly fascinating to me. And I would love to get, maybe just to kick off, like, what are some of your thoughts about just what's happening with that situation or what's something that resonates for you?
Yeah, yeah. And so for me, man, it's a lot here. One, I think, it's important for this context when you think about mayors or governors, there's traditionally uh, two or three seats, maybe four, that matter as far as the context of someone would say you were managing a unit that would indicate that you could manage like the entire enterprise, right? The mayor of New York. But again, to your point, once you're the mayor of New York, there's a certain set of politics that probably makes sure that you're never going to be able to be the, the president of the United States,
Mhm.
just because there's so much going on, right? In the politics of that city while you're navigating tribes and fractious tribes and all the kind of stuff. When it comes to, foreign policy, that gets tough, right? And so that goes back to my point of the other one that people often say, which are big enough to manage, but you probably will never be president, is the governor of California. So the mayor of New York, governor of California, I would add the mayor of Chicago, right? And
Mhm.
then fourth, the governor of Texas are probably the most unwieldy places in America to actually manage that. People think you will be the president, but history clearly shows that's not the case.
Mhm.
Like, cause you think that sounds cool, and then life gets in the way, and we go since '08 with George W. Bush, with President, George W. Bush, you get you get a senator, U.S. senator from Illinois, and Donald J. Trump, for all that means, right? And then Joe Biden, right, a previous vice president. So, that's kind of where you take what everyone thinks and it goes to hell. So anyway, to your point, this is an interesting thing because I think one of the parts that you touched on first was like this like backlash, and the backlash specifically with black mayors, right? So I think when you
Yeah.
look at 2020 and you say, okay, here's a set of conditions in the country. We talked about Vice President Harris, and but then like you take them, and then there are black people who represent almost like a swing back.
Yeah.
And I think this is a class tension that we talk about,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's talked about enough.
Yeah.
Of there, either from an electoral perspective, there's a set of black folks who are like, yeah, I'm down with that, but I'm also down with this. And they end up winning in cities. So I'm gonna use two as an example of who were kind of rode in on that, and then one as an example who didn't, but actually has his own problems.
Mhm.
One, you get, Mayor Adams, and riding in, and it must always be remembered he had deep and abiding support from not only Southeast Queens, which is the highest percentage of voting population in the city of New York, which I don't think gets enough respect.
Mhm.
The population of Southeast Queens, which is mostly black, that includes black folks been there for a long time and immigrants.
Mhm.
Holding Southeast Queens means a lot in New York City. because holding Southeast Queens also means holding kind of that Brooklyn area, East New York, Brownsville. Shout out to our brothers and sisters in East Medina, and like in Brownsville, like it means holding a lot. And that crew of people, yes, are progressive in some ways, but also do care about public safety, and that's nuanced, right? And I think sometimes we have to give that credit for people's experience and what that means. So he was able to hold that and hold a big population of the Latino community as well, and a not insubstantial population of the Hasidic Jews, which is the third one that, again, I don't think gets discussed appropriately. So you got that allows him to win, allows him to beat the progressives who split the votes in South Brooklyn, Upper West Side, Upper East Side, like all these places that you would think that, okay, no, the progressive vote is going to take over now because of what happened in 21. But the voting patterns that we're talking about were very strong. You also have Philadelphia, where, Mayor Parker, Sherrell Parker, also, running as a progressive as far as it pertains to economic issues for Black people and brown people, but also much more middle of the road around public safety and around the broadening shifting of government.
Mm-hmm.
And she won because, again, she, in the same way I'm talking about Southeast Queens, in Philadelphia, the area we call Uptown, being this like really strong community of voters, the 50th ward in particular, being the strongest, highest voter turnout in Philadelphia. And so this is really important, just because in the context of our conversation about Black men,
Mm-hmm.
I'm using two big cities where the biggest population of voters is coming out of Black communities.
Yeah.
And that's not what we talk about. And it's unfair. And I think we'll talk about it on the flip side of the next piece. But that's unfair. But again, definitely running on to, like, we want things to be fair, but we also have these very nuanced politics around public safety. And it makes sense because Black folks are not a monolith. Now, the third one is homeboy, Mayor Johnson in Chicago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of ran a little later than Adams and Parker, but ran differently on a very progressive perspective, and ran against a man who, frankly, in any other world would have been a Republican, except in Chicago, Paul Vallis, who used to run the school district in Chicago and in Philadelphia, interestingly enough.
Mm-hmm.
And he won with a nod, frankly, to racial, solidarity. And generally speaking, I can say this, and if anybody from Chicago, any crews, is running, he ran straight into a bee's nest and hit it with a stick.
He did.
You know what I'm saying? Like, now, again, to his credit, he might have said, "Here's what I'm doing," and y'all probably don't think I'm going to do it, but I actually told you I was going to do it. So here we are, right? But so he's running in a space of, I think he ran very progressive, but I think the mood of the city did change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did.
You know what I mean? The mood of the city changed, and I think he's now combating the fact that the mood of the city has changed since he won. And so I think for Black mayors, it's always this really unique way of how do you manage the changing of a place when, like, you get in power. There's that old adage: by the time Black folks get in power, everything gonna went crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Go
And
ahead.
which sometimes ain't really false. By the time you get it, bugs don't want it no more.
Like, oh man, yeah, get in there, man. I'm glad it's time for a change. We need to see something different. We're gonna hand you this
I
turn.
want you to hold the bag of a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, and I'll just stop with this. I think Adams is also the example To the point you talk a little bit about, he's been in government a long time. So some of the charges, like explicitly, some of the charges he's having go back before he was ever mayor,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is an important context because given I would argue the Byzantine arcane like New York like political space where you could be like the mayor of Brooklyn or the the highest ranking member of Brooklyn, but like it's largely ceremonial. So you could not have any power, although you're the head of the borough, you're the borough mayor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't like
You you
do
can't
nothing.
do nothing. Like you design stuff and show up and be a cheerleader, essentially. And I do think the politics of what black mayors have to do to get places, and then how black mayors negotiate the space, and thirdly, most importantly, what do you think you're available to do? Like going back to old black folks saying to you, do you think you can play like them people? Which I think you're going to touch on in a second. But yeah,
Yeah, and the thing that is fascinating to me about it is like you if there was anything that was going to if I was writing a script of what would a former police officer from um like a working class community enters into politics, moves with this very like you know um clean up your diet and do these other things to take care of your health, real positive, right? A lot of like, you got a positive, work hard, do type of energy. Um, but also a bit of an edge of also like, a bit of a slickness around like, yeah, like almost, I'm more in tune with certain things. I hear what y'all saying on certain issues in the black community, but I think I know better. Uh, and clearly due to the circumstances of this election, it's kind of opened a window where maybe under some other circumstances I would not have really had a shot. And so like I'm taking my jump. Like I've been over here in the mix in the wings and now the window's open. Like what would jam them up? And it would be, you know, something that alleges leads to allegations that been taking money and not so much money, but like things you shouldn't be taking in order to trade influence for power or
right,
you know what I'm saying, like because you're trying to ascend into the world via that channel, and so then you might be looking at the world through a lens that says this is how I can ascend, right? And then if I become mayor, now I'm a person that's been the mayor of the largest city in the United States, one of the great metropolises, and all the ancillary post being mayor benefits that come with that. You can write books, you can be a pundit, you can be a player within the Democrat, well in this case Democratic, but whatever party. If the Republicans had any shot at being the mayor of New York City again, you would have the opportunity to be a player within the larger national politics because you would have be at least be thought to have some level of local sway, authority, or input. And that's sort of the recipe for somebody to and again I think you highlighting that many of the things that were before you became mayor, right? That you would be like, yeah, and then I'm going to be trying to figure out what kind of people say when you run for public office is all this money out there from private interests to help you do other things so you can have influence. Well, I wonder where are my gifts at? You know what I'm saying? Like that you might be open to that type of engagement because you're also looking at this not so much just from a service perspective, but you're looking at this from a status and position and power perspective. Like that's how I'm moving up the chain. And then again, like I'm taking some of my team with me. There's people that's down with me that also may be trying to like find their place into a position of power and influence, and whatever the ancillary benefits that can come from being in those positions. Um, And so then, like, for that to be the way you get jammed up, and then if you get all the way to a federal indictment, which I think we've talked about. We definitely we just talked about it last episode. You don't usually get federal indictments unless they really think they got you. Like they don't. It's mesmerizing and it's fascinating to me because it's like, how didn't you know that you would get jammed up for this sort of thing, right? Like, how did you miss that these types of acts, especially once you get to be where you're trying to go, that the folks are gonna be looking for that. Like they're gonna be looking. I mean, you got this thing happening. I mean, related but unrelated with Mendez over in New Jersey.
Menendez, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And there's some opinion pieces in here from earlier in the month about the reality of like foreign influence in U.S. politics, and you know it for our community and the way we show up, and especially in places like New York's a place where there's a highly developed infrastructure as it relates to Black folks and politics and government. And in some cities people are like, oh yeah, the gatekeepers and these type of people won't let you in. But I don't know if in every city, every area, that is as real a thing as it is in a place like New York, right, where there are, because it's such a giant, as you say, you stated well, Byzantine bureaucratic different offices. It's this giant place with all these different areas of governance, and you have to have all these different layers of government because there's so many people in such a tight space that then within that you could get lost, right? You like somebody wants to get in, serve their community, and like, yeah, I'm gonna be a you could be a what was it they got because they got there's the overall city council, right? And then there's the bureau councils, and the bureaus are the counties, and
There's the,
the bureaus.
right. So there's the overall city council, then the borough mayors, right? Essentially, um, and then you have the borough mayors, and you have the party structures of all the boroughs, which have their own power,
Yeah,
right? So like the Manhattan Party, the Brooklyn Party, all have their own power, which then influence who runs everywhere but Staten Island, which then Republicans run, right?
yeah, that's right. They do.
Right. You got this unique thing of like you got four boroughs out of five that are staunchly Democrat, except one. There just isn't.
So like for him to get jammed up this way, like, yeah, like, color me surprised that the law and order candidate gets caught up with a legal issue. Like, who'd have thought?
And I'm gonna say this because we don't know yet, and we
Yeah,
do prescribe in this town. We prescribe in this country as innocent until proven guilty,
yeah,
right? Even though Black folks don't often get the benefit of that. But what's clear is that what is clear is it separate if I say he did something, right? Because I want to make this distinction. Is that people around you were open with playing fast and loose,
yeah, yeah. And that's the bigger thing for me.
right? Like I'm not assuming he wanted nothing more out the game. Maybe he'd like to get on Turkish Air. Like I guess I don't know. I'll just speak
Right.
for me. I've been in the back of planes. That shit sucks. The back of plane sucks, man. You know what I'm saying? When you get on that plane to go to another country and you get on and you can cut left or right, and when you cut left, that's when you can go get one of them individual seats. And you got to go to the back with 4 or 5 seats in a row. That is one of the most depressing parts to get on a plane.
Yeah, yeah.
Because somebody's next to you.
Yeah. And you'd be looking at it
Yeah.
like, well, I mean, gonna be back. This gonna be us. This is us right here. These are.
It'd be like that little ass blanket, that little ass pillow. Listen, I'm just saying, I'm gonna keep it real. So like I get it, but at the same time, what you're saying is much more of other people. I'm talking about the stuff on the ground and being influenced by foreign governments, which again, going back to our previous conversation, I think as people in America, we need to pay attention that like Foreign influences are influencing our government in the same way that we are very like, oh man, America's over there messing with them people.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Well, guess what? The people's over here messing with us.
yeah,
It might show up in your manosphere conversation. It might show up in your red pill conversation. It might show up in money to go to the Four Seasons. But other governments are actually influencing people who are running for office, and I think that's just like it's one of them examples where you think something only happens in another city, but it's actually happening to you now, and it's influencing the direction of politics in our country.
yeah. And it's the thing I think is like to ask to think about, or what I think is important to think about is other folks who have resources, have money. We'll just say have money. Are trying to get things that they want done, and they are going to use their funds to do it. And we like, and one of a lot of people say, well, of course they do justice. And that's what we think. But we tend to think we're the only, like, our country as an aggregate, that sort of aggregate, we is the only people that got money. Like, whether we admit it or not, we think, oh, like, we, the US and people in, American business and corporate entities have lots of money, but there's only a few other people that got money. And somebody's like, oh, maybe the oil rich countries in the Middle East, and China, this thing we call China, that we don't
Right.
treat as a with any nuance or individual agency. We
Really good point. I know we'll put a pin in that for the future, but that's a really good point.
Yeah, we never did. Europe, we actually almost treat as this benign player. like, we, like we never, very rarely am I in a conversation where someone is, I'll say this: the degree to which U.S. and especially UK based, Ireland based, and even French companies have intermixing of their financial realities. We don't talk about that at all. We just sort of assume like there's U.S. stuff, and then there's some old stuffy English guys with money, but we don't really know who they are. And it's like actually a lot of our stuff is kind of mixed up with each other due to
Absolutely.
a long history of financial dealings, such as substance as banking, the banking interests that made the slave trade possible. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, we'll say that again. Um,
He just always like how you drop that stuff and just be like, I think y'all should think about this. I'm
yeah.
just gonna share it and keep going.
And so, in a modern world where we're moving from I think the geopolitics folks say we're moving from a unipolar place, where we had the Cold War of our youth, and then as Russia is still as a country is still a large international player, but they're not considered like, it's considered like US interests, and then sort of this the West interests, China interests, and then depending on if you consider, and then like Russia, and in the Middle East, like it's like four or five, you know, places where you might be prone to think if external influence or money coming to try to get something done, um, who and especially large cities, because every large city in the world, you are in competition with foreign interests for all of the various things that you might think about, like, oh, well, who's buying those condos? Who wants to develop this piece of land? Who wants, like, you're not just dealing with like US companies that are interested in your real estate. If you're, especially if you're New York, Chicago, LA, even Houston, Miami, we all, which if anyone doesn't know, if y'all didn't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, go look it up. There's plenty of documentation about that. Right? Like, all And so we have this conversation about like who's pushing the needle, who might be trying to seek in favors or return or trying to gain influence and contact. And I think over the next couple of years, it's going to be a bigger and bigger thing that is revealed the level of, you know, wow, that's an interesting housing development. How did that get done? And what is that's a well, everything now has weird names that you can't really tell if it's from a language or just some sounds people put together. But, yeah, I mean, like, how did this development get built, or how did these people hire that person, and why is wow, that seems odd. Like I've never heard of these people, or is there really anyone in that building, and all those sorts of things with the infrastructure development and 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 why a city may be trying to do or go towards a certain thing. And I think we're going to have more of these situations where foreign capital looking for a home. If you're in a country where you have all these resources, but the nature of the local government may or may not always be in your favor. Like, so you trying to get your bread out of that country somewhere else, or have these places almost where people are trying to make landing pads. You know what I'm saying? Like the degree
Right.
that Chinese real estate investment, up and down, especially the West Coast cities, has been a large factor in because at one time, and might be outdated, but I think I've said it, is in space in terms of foreign investment. Real estate is the thing that folks could do. And they could not uh, be in other types of investment and services. They couldn't, like, the place where you like, so the angle where somebody could get, and this is the thing, I think the angle where someone could get jammed up, I think it becomes this thing where, like, again, fast and loose. Somebody, if you move into that level, somebody on your team is like, there's this person, they would like to talk to you and see if you'd love to do a speech about a thing. And you're like, who is that? What do they do? Right now, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? Type energy. Like, and then that shit, you realize, like, oh, that person is like an operative of some challenging international figure. But either way, if you took the
No, but no, but God, no, I think that's really important, because if you think that the things happening in America are all just happening in America,
yeah, yeah,
and that's a really limited view that we have, that I mean, not the rest of the world, because sometimes I think that's
yeah,
a
yeah.
big thing we say, the rest of the world. It's like,
They know what's
yo,
going down. It's like, oh.
yeah, yeah, like, oh, a little too much credit. Like, there's some inward looking folks everywhere else in the world too. So I don't want to say like the rest of the world knows what's going down. America's the only morons. Like, yeah, we have our own special moron behavior. Um, and frankly, American foreign policy makes it that people have to be more aware of how we show up
Mm-hmm.
than other people. But yeah, if you're thinking about New York City, yeah, there's the clear politics of like wealth distribution has been a certain way. There's a class of people who've gotten rich with proximity to power.
Yeah,
Now, whether we call it legal, illegal, I'm not making that point here.
yeah,
They've gotten rich. And then you get people finally back into a position, and people who have been soldiering, so to speak, and they're like, hey, okay, it's my turn. It's like, oh, it's not your turn in that way, sir. Be careful. Right?
yeah,
And the other part is like, okay, like you said, like people are buying buildings in a city where now you're finding, and this is in place all across America, there are LLCs buying like residential properties, like not multifamily residential properties on blocks.
mm,
We never had to think about that. And more importantly, you never had to think about who owns those properties. Because back in the day, at worst, you could be like the landlord, right? There'd be a Gil Scott Heron movie, a Gil Scott Heron song.
Right, right.
The landlord taking advantage.
Yeah.
Now you don't know what LLCs got 3 or 4 LLCs behind it
Yep.
that bought properties. And some of that money is not all American money. Because again, I want to say it because I just said something. I want to check myself. There's no such thing as American money
Yeah.
in global capitalism.
Yeah.
I want to repeat this. There's no such thing as American money in global capitalism.
Yeah.
Right? When LeBron James owns a part of Liverpool, the soccer team. When American companies own parts of like AS Milan, and then vice versa, there's no such thing as that. So we have to disabuse ourselves. So, obviously this is the part where people are like, man, y'all get real deep, man. Y'all done connected Eric Adams to like global capitalism. I want to know for people who are listening right now, say y'all niggas got real deep on that, right?
Y'all in the ocean, baby.
But it's true, which brings it back down to your point about our community, about what does it mean to play fast and loose, given your understanding of the world as it exists. If you know the world is functioning like this, you know your behavior is that much more scrutinized. Because you're not just playing in the I got to get your vote. You're playing in here's the money, here's their engagement, here's how foreign governments are pouring money into things to to influence how cities in America function.
Yeah.
And whether it's New York or LA or Miami, I think those three are like the biggest ones, kind of. You could also add San Francisco on a level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are other parties and other resources and other money pouring into those cities that we treat as a merely continental issue that are not just continental issues. So for folks who want to get into government, who want to play ball, know what you're playing ball in. No, you're not just playing ball in, I got to get these couple votes from these churches over here, and I got to convince the Asian community to be down with me, or I got to convince the Latino. No, you're actually looking at a global context through the lens of your community.
Yeah. And that there are global interests, right? Like that you're not just in a field of operation that is even if the day to day and maybe what moves the needle and gets even the local papers moving is very local and regional. The overall aspect of what you're operating in is other people is broader, right? And so and none of this, like that, is one, we'll see how his case turns out. It is the kind of thing though that stings at the credibility of your leadership of the largest company, not company, what do you call it, city, one of the largest cities in the country, and then your ability to get stuff done, because now the priorities that the people need are going to be interrupted by the investigations of your activities, and that whether in the end he's exonerated, um there's still damage that's been done. You mean by having to have this happen, and I think.
And can I touch on one more thing? And I do think, just let me do. I think this one has gotten a degree of what's the name. So I think that the counterbalance to this might be worth its own show.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, I do want to bring another global context to when we talk about this. Is you touched on something very early. I want to get back to it, which is this idea of like the person who shows up, and while they're showing up as Black and maybe with what we perceive as the politics of Black and brown communities, like they would have a like that black mayor would have a different take on immigration
Mm-hmm.
and you know undocumented immigration.
Mm-hmm.
And so starting from the beginning, and again, I'm juxtaposing Johnson in Chicago and Eric Adams in New York, had a way different view on undocumented immigration and the stressors. And I want to be just because that's just a thing. The stressors that undocumented immigration puts on a city. That's not a value judgment. That's not a good or bad. That's just it puts stressors when you have to bring in hundreds of thousands of new people in any context. I don't care if you're Phoenix and got to bring hundreds of thousands of new people because they want to move there and you got water problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you're New York and you bring in hundreds of thousands of new people and you have to house them. Regardless, you're going to be challenged as a mayor or a leader when that has to happen. And the take on it and the relationship to the administration, not going to get into my conspiracy theories here. I'm going to leave my dose for another day until we hear more. However, you fighting for support from the federal government and making certain assertions in order to get it, only not to get it, also has something to do, I think, with the way that you exist out kind of like in the wind, as we would say.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
You know, more to be revealed on that. But I do think like that's also part of it.
Yeah. 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 He absolutely. And uh unprecedented sort of experience, right? For those mayors to have this very this very unique intentional acts by others to like add stress to your governance by like
Oh yeah, thank you for saying that's a really good point.
to be funding, and I still don't totally know how they be paying for these buses that they be putting people on, but however they doing it, I don't know if they're using public dollars to do that, but which yeah. Anyway, which would be at least be interesting. I know that they're
Whether it's private dollars or public dollars is wild either way, right?
yeah,
Like
either way it's
whatever answer
fine.
we get to
It
is
just
wild.
yeah, right, and then then just be like put people on buses and then they just show up in the place like, yeah, they put us on this bus. They said it was something, somebody's gonna be here. And you just get off the bus and then, any reasonable person would say if somebody was just got put off a bus and they ain't know where they was going, you should at least try to help them get somewhere to sleep for the night. Like you ain't, you don't gotta turn the whole world upside down, but you can't be like, oh man, hope it works out for you, bro. And like some people can, but like your local government probably shouldn't. Like, probably shouldn't do that. Um,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it is a very. I'm very interested in something I need to sit down and do some more reading on just to get a like a because I don't think I don't think I even understand the whole scope of like how that's showing up in these cities and like I see the things that, I see the silly things on the internet that people are doing related to it. All of which, especially the videos that you find, speak to it, if not a foreign influence, definitely somebody's influence to like frame the world in a certain kind of way. And I think this is the thing we're in now. This is how the messaging around what is or isn't happening with elected officials, what is or isn't happening with the effectiveness or the intention of those who govern. Um, these are like the terms, especially at the highest levels of this, right? So, um, not, I don't think as a basic local administrator, I don't think I need to director, I need to worry too much about somebody trying to put together a video. The school board doesn't care about the whatever. You know what I'm saying? I don't think, but I will tell people, I think I might have said it in this space. Here as an elected school board member, you're considered an extension of the Oregon state legislature. and we are subject to the same Oregon state ethic laws, as well as other people who serve on, certain types of public facing bodies like the Port of Portland or, I think that's probably the bit one of the easy ones, like TriMet board, anywhere where there's the potential that someone, an entity or an actor would maybe want to do something for you to gain influence to potentially do business with the place you have oversight of. um, you know, you need to be tuned in to like, yo, these people said they want to take me to a dinner in my role as a school board member and talk to me about something. And I'd be like, oh man, I've never been to that restaurant. I really want to eat there. Like if I eat more than $15 sandwich, I gotta write it. I gotta tell somebody about it. And even the guidelines basically say, don't take that dinner. Pay for it yourself, so you don't have to worry about that. It's really,
Right.
what I mean. And I don't know what other states have, but filling mine out for the first time was definitely like, wow, this is super annoying because I don't really I'm like, and then like anybody lives in your house went on a dinner, you gotta like
Oh
document.
wow.
Yeah, like you got to at least you got to think about it. You got to it's So I don't know what they do in other states, but if it's anything like that, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, that's yeah, I don't know. So be safe out there, I guess, and maybe we all get to a positive ending for the embattled mayor. You know what I'm saying? And most importantly for the well being of the great people of the great city of New York. You know what I'm saying?
And I'll just say this in closing. Yeah, I think to your point, guy, you touched on it. Like the people are who matter,
Yeah.
right? Like we do this soap opera thing, but the people are who matter. And thinking about how you serve the people, but also in how you serve the people, how are you thoughtful and how you have people around that can serve the people from top to bottom. And like you said, be safe out there, man. Be safe.
Um, is you still up uh uh for Rice?
I gotta eat, man. I ain't eating shit.
Yeah. All right, we wrap up. We wrap up. So next time on on Black Leaders in Power. Like that.
Part three.
So we'll save add on more about that for what I mean, for but there's some juxtaposition, and I think that there is a lot to be learned about, like lot to consider around, and I think it's related to the conversation last week, or last time, around how you're engaging with us, but really the lack of respect shown to the kind of the depth of what's happening with us in politics and how we are related to political issues and governments. It's because it's very easy to get into this, like again, like the government and not the government, and uh, you know, you know, nothing that goes to what is the apparatus in your city, who are the folks that are really involved day to day in politics, and who are folks who are more transactionally engaged, and I say transactionally from a, like, there's times when I'm engaged and there's other times where it just doesn't rate for me to be using my time thinking about that, so I'll be back next time it matters for me. And um the discussion doesn't often give us the space to be like, yeah, well, what would my vision be to be more engaged look like? You know what I'm saying? Is it just elected promising and delivering stuff to me, or is it something else? You know what I'm saying? So, um, next time maybe add on, I'd like to touch base on some of that, because I think that is the juxtaposition I would like to look at, when we talk about Rice and what's happening in Newark.
Let's do it.
All right. So with that, no, I appreciate you. Anything else?
No, for the good. I think we're good for the good of the order, baby.
All right. So with that, I say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic. Good Brothers is a part of the Ask Your Old Head podcast for now. And you can support the podcast by listening, rating, and subscribing wherever you listen. You can also support the podcast by becoming a patron. Search Justice Rajee on Patreon and sign up to help make this happen. Future's coming fast, so please engage in the electoral process wherever you at. And yeah, this will be brief, but we'll be back. Peace.